Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name is Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. And Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. And you can catch it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today my guest is Ben Brearley, and he is the thoughtful leader. And we're going to be discussing accountability in the workplace. And Ben is a leadership coach, an MBA, and consultant who helps thoughtful leaders build confidence and find the right balance they need in their leadership to be more effective. Ben has led, mentored, and coached leaders and team members at a wide variety of organisations in industries including healthcare, government, utilities, technology, resources, and construction. Good morning, Ben, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Right. And so one of the common problems that you've come across is that there is no accountability in many of the workplaces. So please explain how this can be fostered further.
Sure. So, one of the things I constantly hear when I'm working with people or, at different workplaces is that there is no accountability. So people will complain about there's an issue, something happened, nothing was done about it, no one got in trouble or whatever it was. So that's one of the things I commonly hear cropping up. And I think for me, accountability is not just about blame though, in terms of, okay, we need someone to blame when this all goes wrong. It's more about, it's a really powerful tool to motivate people in teams and also improve morale. And it's a really good leadership tool, accountability, because if you can instill some accountability and ownership in your team and people step up to own their different areas and own their tasks, you're likely to see fewer mistakes, and then leaders can get on with actually doing the leadership work rather than the running around firefighting and trying to fix all the burning issues. So there's that's sort of my take on it, because I think the more people, when I talk about accountability, for me it's about ownership. So it's about owning the work you've got, owning that piece of whatever you're taking accountability for in a team, and that's more likely to lead to discretionary effort, so employee engagement and people stepping up to deliver more for you. So I think it's very relevant for businesses because in the environments where there is perception of no accountability, you'll get people disengaged because they'll go, oh, well, that person's getting away with murder, they're not doing their work, but I'm doing my work and nothing's happening to them, why should I bother? And then you just get this downward spiral of limited motivation in the team.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
totally agree. I totally agree with that. I've worked in heaps of organisations, especially government ones, that there's no accountability, and people just get away with whatever. And here's me, nose down, butt up, and there's nothing happening, and it's really annoying.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think there was a saying I heard the other day, the fastest way to disengage a good employee is to not do anything about a bad one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I tried that once and got in so much trouble.
Well, that's the other challenge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that lacking accountability or ownership of whatever can, damage the motivation of others in the workplace or in that particular team. So when leaders don't hold those people who aren't, doing what they're meant to be doing, how, other than counselling and, all those sorts of things, how can they better their team environment if they don't sack them or do whatever?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons why people don't hold, or leaders don't hold people accountable, and ultimately it does come back to leadership. Like if you are in an environment where the leaders aren't holding people accountable, it's very difficult to get them to do that if you're working in those teams and things. But so it does come down to leadership. And one of the things I've seen, or a couple of sources of this problem, is one in particular is people being very uncomfortable about holding people accountable is one thing. So it can be a bit confrontational, you're almost calling someone out for their performance or if they haven't done something right. And a lot of the people I coach have this, what I call sort of struggle with managing the balancing act of leadership is, okay, I'm too nice to my team, or I'm too hard on them, and I don't want to be that tyrant leader, but I need them to do stuff. And so it's a bit of a mindset shift, actually. And the other thing is, so I think people struggle with that, and they might tend towards avoidance and go, well, it's a bit too hard, I can just do it myself, and and run around fixing all the problems. And then other people, I don't think they sort of know how to hold people accountable, and you can undo accountability quite easily if you take certain actions that you might not even be aware of, that really can send it going backwards. So you want to hold someone accountable, but then sometimes this fear behavior kicks in, or what if they still stuff it up and I'm relying on them, or I don't want to let them do that, so I better be right on top of them, which can actually decrease their motivation and resort to micromanagement and all that sort of thing. And then it ends up being you're sort of taking that accountability off them. So there's a couple of different sources. And I don't think many leaders are intentionally going, I don't want to hold people accountable, I don't care if performance is bad in my team. I think it's possibly a lack of awareness of how they're behaving, a lack of intention in the things that they're doing. That's a big thing I'm an advocate of as well, just thinking more deeply about how you're impacting the people around you and how you're engaging them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, for a leader or manager to not micromanage their team, and then it's also difficult for them to stop being the person who's putting out all the fires all the time, and not making the team accountable for their actions. And really, it doesn't serve a great purpose, because it's a bit like a child, really. Your actions, you have got to be accountable for your actions. And as adults, we should have learned that by now.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it is like going to a workplace full of children occasionally.
A lot of bitching and moaning and crying and all sorts of other things, and people aren't happy, and people, there are some workers who aren't taking responsibility for their slackness or whatever, can bring about mental health issues for the rest of the team members, which is
100%.
And and then the leader or manager has to deal with those, and doesn't doesn't know how to handle it. And on the other side of the coin, they may not even know that someone's not doing their job properly because everyone else is covering up for them.
Yeah, that's another common problem as well. And I think for me, it's about setting the right conditions for accountability. So you've got to set up the right environment, but then you've also got to actually have things in place that can, you've got to monitor, and like you're saying, having that oversight at the right level so you can see what's happening in the team. Many managers I meet and have worked with are, they're all busy and running around, they're in meetings all day, they don't really have time to engage with their teams as much as they should, and this causes that problem that you're talking about, which is they're covering up for them and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, because just to keep the peace within the team, which is not really helpful to anybody.
No, definitely.
Especially, and I think the person who's not being, not doing the right thing. It's not letting them better themselves, and they're just going to keep being slack and just not doing their work.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing as well. It's not, very rarely do I see employees come to the workplace and want to do a bad job and want to annoy everyone and be toxic, but often it's driven by fear. And then if you want to hold them accountable, and sometimes they want to step up and take accountability, but they don't really feel like they have the means to do that. So I'm almost always of the point of view, my default position is try to assist the person to be able to step up and take that accountability. And then the fallback position, obviously, if things aren't working and there's performance problems and behavior problems, is to actually, manage that situation. But I think the default is, my general default is to start with, focusing on the person. How can we help them improve? Because obviously, even the statistics sort of bear it out, the cost of rehiring someone is astronomical compared to keeping the same person and developing them in the role. So, so that's another, I guess, a more numbers-based reason for it, I guess.
Yeah, and it takes, on average about 3 months to actually train somebody. So
Yeah.
from, start to finish, from recruitment to, getting them up to scratch. So, there's the time issue as well. So
Yeah. I've
So
been in
yeah,
some businesses where it takes about 3 months just to get them in the door.
yeah. Well, that too. Yes, very, very hard for doing that. So I'm a bit lost here. So how
Well,
can we, I guess, get more engagement from the team to make this person, more accountable for their actions?
yeah, well, I think there's a couple of steps that you sort of put in place or go through. And the first one is about sort of choosing the right target for your accountability as well. So if you're seeing problems in your team in a particular area, sometimes there's a perception from leaders that they have to do all the leadership. Like I'm the leader, so I have to be in charge of everything, every aspect of the team. But the reality is, I might have built my career being really good at one thing, and now I'm leading a team that does several things, and I'm not the expert in all of those things. Plus, I don't have time to do everything. So you sometimes problems like that can be fixed by actually appointing people to be accountable for certain areas of the team. Like if we have to communicate or engage stakeholders or something, you can be the boss of that particular function, and this is what I need you to do. And then, you're on the hook for being accountable for that in my team, for example. So it's about choosing the right person, I think, in the right area to try to fix that performance.
My light just went out. Never mind.
Okay, that's a sign.
It is absolutely because
So then sorry, go on.
go on. No, it's okay.
So the second part is the expectations. So setting clear expectations is sort of an obvious one, but one that's a bit overlooked. So if you're holding someone accountable, what do you expect from them? What do you expect them to do? Why is it important is a good one as well. Some people just sort of, they assume that people understand why you want them to do something in a certain way. Deadlines are obviously important. When do you need this thing done? Who do you need people to talk to? And in some cases, when we're dealing with compliance and health and safety and all those sorts of things as well, particularly, there might be some reason why you need the work done a certain specific way as well. So those have to be made clear as well, so you don't have someone going down the wrong path. And often leaders will assume that because I'm thinking something in my head, then that person knows exactly what to do. And maybe they're busy as well, so they don't think it through, and they go, oh yeah, I need this thing done, and they don't say when it's due and all these sorts of things. So that's one thing, is clear expectations. The next one I find is like what I call putting the spotlight on people. So when you've sort of put someone, hold someone accountable for something, you go, okay, you're in charge of this thing, this is what I expect from you. You've got to reinforce that somehow. So one of the ways to do that is to put the spotlight on them in terms of, let's say you've got back to that communications example with stakeholders. Let's say that you've got a weekly or monthly meeting or something that that is involved in that topic and discussing the engagement with stakeholders. If you have your person who's on point for that, let's say Sarah is on point for that task. So Sarah organizes this meeting, then you rock up as the manager as well, and people start deferring to you in that meeting because you're the manager. And then what that does is it takes that accountability off Sarah, even though she's meant to be accountable for that thing. So she can sit back, and she probably feels compelled to sit back, because if she goes over the top and goes, hey, no, I'm managing this, she might look like, bad in front of her boss and those sorts of things. So that's one common thing I see when the manager and the person who they're holding accountable are just always in the same forums, always in the same communications. The manager's always the point of contact. And that means that the manager's always on the hook for everything, which means it's very hard.
Yeah, but I get annoyed. I mean, I used to get annoyed when, I was given a task and I was to lead the team in a specific task. And then, in the team meeting, they'd go to the manager and ask all the questions when I had all the answers, basically.
Yeah,
and that
100%.
used to really annoy me. And I think that would annoy that particular Sarah in that instance. I think, well, it would annoy her because she'd think, well, she's insignificant. And then so she would try less, not try harder.
Yeah, and what was your attitude when that happened? So when they're going to that other person?
I got really annoyed. I was like hurt because I thought, well, why bother? If I'm in charge of this particular task, they should be coming to me.
Yeah, and the
for
why bother
answers.
that why
Yeah, why
bother is the
bother?
key.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why
because
bother?
people, you can sit back. Okay, my manager's going to take it all anyway. So, what's
Yeah,
the point?
that's exactly right. And that sort of attitude is not helpful. It's not helpful for me, for my mental health. It's not helpful for the team because they know that I'm pissed off. And that's
Yep.
not helpful for the manager because he doesn't know what's going on.
Yep. So, well, yeah, you've identified 3 big problems with that approach. So that's exactly what I'm talking about there. And one of the second ones that managers often do is they jump in and help at the first sign of trouble. So, okay, Sarah, you're accountable for this. One of the stakeholders is angry. You'll have to go meet them or whatever. Oh, no, it's okay. I'll sort it out because I am scared that this is going to spiral out of control. And then I worked in a place where I had a manager that did that, and it really reduces your credibility in the eyes of everyone around you because you're meant to be owning this thing, and now someone's swooping in and saving the day for you. And even though it comes from a place probably of good intentions, but the reality is, yeah, you just look like, you're undermined effectively. You don't seem like you can do the work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It makes you feel, I don't know, less. It really takes away your self-esteem.
Yep.
Self-confidence.
100%. Yeah. And it stops your development because you won't step forward. Yeah, you lose that confidence. And that's a really critical one as well, which I see is this self-fulfilling prophecy that happens in the workplace. So, for example, if I believe in Sarah and I think she's going to do an amazing job and I let her have the accountability, I step back, then she's going to see my behavior and go, oh, he trusts me to do that work. That means I must be good at this. He thinks I can do it. All right, let's go for it. And she's more likely to own it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But when the opposite happens, and I've seen this happen, like a really good example of someone who was running a project once, and it was their sort of first project, doing project management work, and their boss was sort of mentoring them, but their boss was really anxious about the outcomes of this project and would constantly go, haven't you done this yet? What about this? Why haven't you done that? Oh, you've got to talk to that person. And this person was becoming a nervous wreck. And it was just this downward spiral of confidence where it's like, oh, I can see that my boss thinks I'm no good. Therefore, I feel no good. And now I'm actually going to perform worse, which makes then the manager goes, see, I told you they were useless.
Yeah.
And it's it's this self-fulfilling prophecy, which is a
So
real
how do we train
danger.
our leaders and our managers to, not be that micromanager and the fire putter outer?
I think a lot of it's about awareness of how they're behaving. So to be able to, and this is what I do a lot of coaching around as well, is really highlighting some of the benefits of this behavior that they're showing. So, a lot of it's about these limiting beliefs that people have about if I don't watch what my person is doing, then everything will go wrong. Or if I am not available 100% of the day to help this person, then things will go off the rails. So it's about being aware and raising awareness of that behavior, as well as, giving people some simple guidelines like this is quite, is a thing that people can take. Another one I find is that one thing leaders don't do is they don't. So if I say, okay, Sarah, you're accountable for this thing, and I tell her exactly what I need to be done and how she should run the show and all those sorts of things, and expectations are very clear, but then I don't tell anyone else. So I might say, oh, Rose, I want you to lead up this thing. And you go, all right. And then you run off and start doing stuff. And some people go, well, who made you the boss?
Yeah.
Because you're not aligning everyone. And that's another thing I've seen happen where people run into roadblocks like, oh, well, why are you in charge of this? Why should I do what you say? Because you haven't really communicated clearly. But I think a lot of it is, to be honest, about awareness of how this behavior is impacting the people around them.
Yeah,
in
but
terms
so
of
who brings that awareness to the manager or the leader? Is it from the bottom up, or do you go over their head and make a complaint to their manager, or what's the solution?
from the team level, you mean? So if you've
Yeah.
got someone in the team, yeah. So, well, one thing you can do, and I think this is a common challenge as well, the pushing back in workplaces and saying no and negotiating workloads and all these sorts of things. So people are quite scared to do that, and it makes a lot of sense because you're pushing back against a manager who's more senior than you, for example. I think one thing people can do, employees can do, is to, if they show value in their role and they're good at things, they can actually build trust with their manager, and then they can actually have that conversation with the manager, say, hey, I'd really like to own this, I'd like to be able to do this, can I take more of responsibility in this area? Because sometimes managers aren't really aware that someone wants to step up either, and if the employee can paint a picture of what that might look like for them, sell some of the benefits as well. If I run this thing, you don't really have to do all this. You don't have to come to this meeting every week and worry about this. I can handle all this for you. And also another thing I find useful in these sort of negotiation conversations is trying to reframe it like it's the manager's idea. So even taking a bit, and managers who are what I call thoughtful and self-aware and those sort of things, they're more likely to lead well anyway. But the managers who aren't, you can do things like pick up on something they've said and say, hey, I really like what you said in that meeting the other day. It gave me this idea that I could run this for you and do this. And it sort of frames it as, oh, okay, you've used my idea and you've come up with something. That means I sort of thought of it. That's awesome. And that helps soften it and make that conversation a bit easier as well.
Yeah.
So it's difficult though, definitely difficult from an employee point of view. But another thing to do, which is more of a direct option, is to actually have that conversation with the manager about, when this happens, this is how I feel about my area of accountability. So when you check up on me every 5 minutes, this is what happens and this is how I feel. And that's tough as well though, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a really tough conversation to have, and it requires a lot of confidence, but also requires knowing your value as well. But I think it is best tackled from the top down, which is to help raise leaders' awareness on how they might be impacting their teams and their people.
Yeah. You're quite right on all levels there. It does depend on the team confidence, or the person in that team who really has the issue. And yeah, I guess making the manager above the manager aware of what's going on can be helpful to the team in general, really.
It can be, and that's a difficult one to do as well. What you can also try is what I've found in a lot of organizations is people have relationships with all sorts of people in other teams and areas. And if you can sort of find an ally in another manager who's a colleague of your manager and you're not getting traction, you can actually get them to help make the case as well. So you can build a bit of an allied front to help engage this and say, oh, how about this thing? And then it comes from someone who's an equal level of authority, let's say, rather than you trying to push up all the time. Yeah, it's another way to go about it potentially.
That is helpful, yes, because sometimes the manager feels like they've been stabbed in the back when they're not. They're just not performing to the level that they should be.
Yeah, and I think it is sometimes people get stuck, even managers who have managers, right? Obviously, everyone has a manager of some respect, pretty much. So even let's say a section manager and a branch manager above them or whatever, we often assume when we're in leadership roles that our manager knows what's going on and understands what we're dealing with or how we're feeling. So we don't say anything. We think, oh, the manager's really, not looking after me, not looking after my interests, and they're really being an idiot, that sort of thing. But in some cases, they're too busy, or they're not paying attention, or they're, or whatever it might be, they're super stressed. Sometimes having that conversation, just saying, hey, here's what's happening for me, here's what's happening with my team, I reckon I can provide benefit. I had a coaching client once who was struggling with workload, and they were a manager and they had a team, and there was all these work requests coming from a different area of the business, not down, but across and down, which is difficult as well. But and so the manager had never really had a conversation though with his manager about that issue. He just assumed that the person knew what was going on in the team, and they just didn't. And until they know, because organizations, as you know, are super complex, and there's all sorts of politics and all sorts of, you think, oh, my work comes from my manager, but not really, because you've got all these teams wanting different stuff and all these people all over the place. So yeah, sometimes it's actually raising awareness of what's actually happening in the team. And I guess I'm giving the managers in this scenario, the leaders, the benefit of the doubt here. I try not to go into organizations and conversations assuming that the leaders are all horrible and toxic and useless. And of course that is, and we've seen a lot of that recently in the government and all those sorts of, in Parliament and things like that in Australia, which has been real nightmare. So yeah, I go in with a positive frame of mind, but I understand that sometimes you sort of have to tackle it from the top down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what great advice have you got to leave with our listeners today?
I would say great advice. I guess on the topic of accountability, I would say, or if you are a manager or a leader, I would pick out some of those key points: clarifying expectations and what you need from people, putting people in the spotlight, but also helping them grow into whatever area of accountability then they need. So if you think someone needs upskilling, training, more confidence, there are ways to put that in place by mentoring and buddying them up with someone more senior, all those sorts of things. So I would just pay a great deal of attention to how you're framing that that accountability with your team, and help them grow into that role, rather than assuming people can't do things and those sorts of things. So I guess it comes back to focusing on the positives and what the employee can be capable of, and being intentional about your behaviour and how that might be, affecting the situation. I guess there's a lot there, but
yeah, good stuff. Have you written any books, or do you have a podcast?
I do have a podcast called the Thoughtful Leader Podcast. Not surprisingly, because my business is called Thoughtful Leader. Yeah, that's on Apple Podcasts, and basically I just, it's a solo show at the moment where I just talk about leadership topics of all sorts for 10 to 15 minutes or episodes, so quite short and sharp, which I like. I've got a bunch of ebooks actually, one on this sort of topic, the Hold Your Team Accountable ebook, which I have on thoughtfulleader.com as well, and the Team Accountability course, which I have also available through thoughtfulleader.com as well, which talks about some of this and helps people build a plan for their team to help improve accountability in their team. Because every team's different, it's hard to go, oh, you know what, you should do this, because every workplace is way different, as you know. And so it's difficult to just have a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, and where can they find you, Ben?
The best place is definitely thoughtfulleader.com, and that's probably the best one. Yeah, that's where you can find links to all my things and the courses and coaching as well. Yeah, that's the best place for it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I've learnt a lot about accountability. It's been a good topic because it's not discussed enough, I don't believe, in the workplace, and how it can affect managers and team members. So yeah, thank you for the insight. It was really great.
No, you're welcome. It's a very tricky topic, obviously, and it's not an easy solution, but I think there's some things you can do to improve.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Rose.
See ya.